Well, this is Current Yield, Grant's interest rate observer of the air, and I am Jim Grant. And with me, as always, is the great deputy editor of Grant's, Evan Lorenz. Good morning, Evan.
Good morning.
Good. That sounded cheery. Ladies and gentlemen, we are recovering from volume 39, number 2. We published last night, and it generally takes 36 hours or so to clear heads. But we are striving for clarity this morning because we have on the transatlantic telephone, we have Tom Beevers and Jules Hull, and they are members of the team of StockViews, of which more in a moment. In fact, Tom Beevers is the CEO and co-founder. And what StockViews does is know stuff about equities and know not only the things that one can know by glancing at public documents, but actually getting in under the numbers and procuring not only facts but also insights. Very valuable indeed. Evan, we came to know StockViews because of their merely superb analysis of one of the companies that we wrote about, if memory serves, in a somewhat disapproving vein. Was that correct?
That is precisely correct. It's a company based in Europe that has very opaque accounts and just doesn't like telling you anything about what they do.
That's always a good sign. But what intrigues me also about StockViews is what they have done with the computer, to use the technological word. They are using, if memory serves, something called machine intelligence for getting, again, deeper into the numbers and somehow snatching meaning from otherwise inert data.
Perhaps when you pour over the screen and you kind of see the red flags that are kicked up on governance, accounting, and other things, what broad trends are you seeing, and did anything change over the course of COVID? Did companies become more aggressive in presenting earnings? Did they become less aggressive? Did you see any kind of worrying trends start to emerge? Like when you kind of take a look at all the data that gets pulled up from your product, what's the conclusion you come to?
Well, one thing, Evan, that we have spotted is that the number of companies that allude to adjusted earnings and that look for EBITDA as a sort of central yardstick for investors, that has been on the rise, and dramatically so since the impact of COVID, which is one of the sort of reasons why what we're doing with Dragonfly to coalesce the red flags that emerge in governance and in the accounting side, which is the sort of why and the how, that can become incredibly powerful at this moment where you've seen that that really ramp up. Tom, sorry, you're about to.
Yeah, there are many. Yeah, what we find fascinating is delving into the individual signals, because these signals kind of pop up at various points, and we like to look into it and see. Sometimes that signal is not always a valid signal, because you can have a red flag that maybe once you dig into it doesn't necessarily point to anything egregious. But when we've been following up on some of these flags and looking into the specific instance, what we are finding is that, and we look under the surface, we are finding a lot of instances where these point to seemingly egregious behavior, and I think one of the things that we found really interesting is just how much management are prepared to or able to push the envelope a little bit in terms of presenting a certain narrative, and how that's often been accepted by the market in this environment.
Can you give us an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of companies who are raising. One example, I suppose, is exceptional items. A huge number of exceptional items coming up, and particularly over the course of COVID, this management taking advantage, perhaps, of COVID to a degree, to say, there are a lot of costs here which we consider exceptional. And digging under the surface, you can find companies where they've been pretty generous in their definition of exceptionals, and pushing a huge amount into the exceptional bucket in order to present a good view of normalized earnings. This kind of, I suppose, EBITDA-C, if you like, EBIT before depreciation and amortization and COVID. So this kind of bucketing a lot into exceptional items is one thing that we see.
You know, it's astounding to the observer, the ordinary lay observer of affairs in Europe, I guess particularly, but also worldwide, is the ability of an outfit like Wirecard, the infamous German payment processor, to get away with year after year of criminality in its accounts, to have lost €900 million gone missing, to have stonewalled the Financial Times, to have mesmerized the European buy side. I mean, how did that happen, and how does that fit into the way you proceed? And has the European mentality changed since these revelations have finally emerged?
Yeah, I think part of that is part of this, right, is a global phenomenon that we find investors are just so credulous in this environment of what management tell them, and there's very little room for skepticism in this market. And actually, you look into the details of Wirecard, there was the signs were, once you dug under the surface, there were a lot of the stuff had been brought to the surface, which the market was frankly just ignoring, and it wasn't stuff that was, some of this stuff wasn't even that hard to find, and it was there for people to see, and yet we saw Wirecard kind of grind on, and we saw the investors kind of swallow it, which was pretty interesting in itself. And then the other element, which is a bit of Europe specific here, is the regulator who was aggressively against took umbrage at the short sellers and very much took the side of the company in all of this, which I think to an observer in the US looked astounding, quite incredible. I think there's some kind of, how should I put it, some kind of introspection, definitely some introspection from this. I don't know how much will change, because there's a certain cultural element here whereby short sellers are kind of seen as the devil by regulators and governments in Europe. But certainly there is some level of introspection, but I'm not entirely confident that the culture will change.
I was just going to say that I think we had the head of the German regulator resign, I think, last week, wasn't it? So I think there are signs that there's a different attitude emerging, and certainly probably needs to be a slightly different attitude emerge when, there are multiple signs out there that something is, especially when they come, like you say, from quite reputable sources in multiple different angles. It's even more extreme to ignore them. But
so I also believe that Boffin, the regulator, the top guy who just resigned, also owned stock in Wirecard during the process of attacking the shorts. One question I have for you is, in the U.S., there's certain states where a company is incorporated that tends to indicate that it may be more fraudulent on average than other companies, and there's certain industries that are more aggressive in accounting. Like if I look at a generic software company, I expect them to add back stock comp because they say it's not a cash expense, and they'll have a very big difference between adjusted EPS and EPS. Are there certain countries or regions within Europe that are more aggressive at accounting, or certain sectors or subsectors where you see just more red flags than other sectors? Are there certain places where you think the phishing's, I guess, just a little more, lucrative when you're starting to look for a short, if it's a, say, German company or a Luxembourg company or a company in a certain industry?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much geographically, actually, but certainly sector-wise, there are, as you mentioned, software is a classic one where particularly around revenue recognition, there's quite a bit of leeway there. There's some permissiveness within the way that revenue is recognized that can be taken advantage of, let's say. Sometimes in the healthcare sector is another one that where you do see sometimes aggressive revenue recognition. There are certain sectors where you have some kind of leeway or ability to juice the numbers a little bit more than other sectors, definitely. Yeah, it's an interesting question on the geographics. It's not something that we've really looked into, but it's quite possible that you'd find a pattern there as well.
And also I think in the capital goods space, with the sort of emergence of how contract assets are now classified with the IFRS 15, there's quite a lot of leeway to distort the picture potentially there. So I think that's another space where, anything that has long dated orders, definitely an area that sort of flags up quite aggressively.
Is there another Wirecard out there?
I'm almost certain there is. These things don't travel alone. It comes back to the analogy with WorldCom and Enron, that you have your Enron and then you have your WorldCom and your Tyco and various other frauds come out. So it kind of comes back to my initial comment that I think this is a extremely fertile ground for frauds, and I would expect that there are more to come. The timing is, of course, a difficult one, but I imagine that the fallout probably isn't limited to Wirecard.
What we're hoping to try and do with where we're going with Dragonfly is, as we build out the governance side of the sort of red flag capturing, which is much more esoteric, and the way the data is presented is incredibly heterogeneous. So often it's something that's glossed over by, even though the rise in ESG is massive, as you guys have talked about in previous podcasts. It's often the remuneration reports, it runs 20 odd pages, but they often get overlooked. So one of the exciting things will be to blend what you're seeing in some of the more non-obvious accounting flags that we look at, where you have to go into the real detail of, the accounts like loss allowances on trade receivables or something like that, and then combining that with thinking about, other signs you're getting on the governance side, whether it be what's going on in incentivization or related party transactions, or being able to sort of then combine those signals together. And it'd be lovely to try and go back and sort of stress test that on some of the examples that we talked about earlier. But that's where maybe you can start to do that sort of human brain analysis of piecing the puzzle together, right? That's ultimately what you want to be able to try and do, what the regulator probably wants to try and do as well, right?
Based off of your work so far, are there certain kind of approaches to accounting or fine print or language in fine print or in the various sections about management remuneration that you think investors should be on the alert for? Like if you see like a certain approach to, accounts receivable, it's just something that kind of hackles on your back and kind of indicates that there might be something there. Are there kind of certain trends that you're seeing that, investors should be looking for and that you think are kind of ripe for abuse at the moment?
Yeah, I think one great place to start, we think, and one thing that we cover is just how management incentivized. And that's something that we can extract from the corporate governance disclosures. So how is their bonus structured and what metric is their bonus based on? So if you've got a structure where the bonus is, say, 100% based on revenue, to take an extreme example, and you can earn out 2 or 3 times your base salary purely on that metric, that to us creates an environment where that management is incentivized to juice the numbers or to aggressively push the whole organization towards revenue generation over anything else. We look quite closely at those incentives and how management are incentivized, because we think that's often where trouble starts. I think it was Charlie Munger who said, "Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome," something like that. I'm not sure I'm quoting him correctly there, but that we think that's really important, how are management incentivized.
We're talking to Tom Beevers and Jules Hull of StockViews team, and I wanted to ask you fellows, what can machine learning do that humans can't, and what can humans do that artificial intelligence, what machine intelligence systems cannot do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and my co-founder on the technical side could probably talk for days about this, but I'll give you the high-level kind of overview here. So essentially, the problem that we have as human analysts is that the amount of information out there is just too enormous to really process in any sensible way. When you look at the average size of an annual report that runs to several hundred pages, it's going to take several days for an analyst to run through that, to look at all the fine print, to look at all the disclosures, calculate the ratios, look at the numbers, and to draw insights out of that. So that's a fundamental problem that we're seeking to address, is that just a bulk of information out there is just too much for a human to process. That's just one company, right? So what a machine can do extremely well is to pull out the data or the disclosures that look important to us. And of course, what we do as humans is to build the algorithms to tell the machine what to look for and what's significant. That machine is effectively extracting various data points. So we're looking at several hundred data points across every annual report. Some of it structured data, so some of it coming from a table from the balance sheet or a table in the notes to account. Some of it is coming in a more unstructured format, maybe within the corporate governance disclosure, some text that we need to extract. So what our systems do is extract the correct data, extract the relevant data, and then draw insights out of it and transform it in a way that a human can then understand, not just a data dump, but turn it into some kind of insight that a human analyst can then understand.
Okay.
The level for a human beyond that is applying the context in a market which, trying to understand the inference of that on a market which does still have humans at the root of the decision making, right? So even though, algos make up the bulk of trading or whatever it is, you still have human beings, the bulk of a lot of the decision making, although that's obviously changing with passive flows, etc. But once you have that unbiased, data service to you as an analyst, you can then have that more generalist view of applying it in a sort of mosaic format that obviously humans are much more capable of versus a machine with its sort of very more specific focus.
Gentlemen, based upon the work that you do and that your machines do for you, would you say that the more attractive approach to the 1,200 or so companies that you analyze is to be long them, or are the better and more compelling opportunities, in your view, on the short side, that is selling them and then harvesting the decline? Which side of the market, the long or the short to you, appears fundamentally more interesting in Europe?
I would argue that fundamentally the short side is looking more interesting here. But to come back to your earlier point, there's certainly, that's not to say it's
safe.
It's risk. yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is a bit of a problem, right? Because here, fellas, look at the wonderful flowers out in this field. Of course, the field is mined, and you may well blow yourselves up as you pick the daisies, but still, have at it. So I don't know, it sounds like a bit of a conundrum. And something else I've noticed in your research, fellas, is that you seem to abjure the role of salesman. I read someplace that you will not have anything to do with salesmen. That's correct, is it?
We take the attitude that we try not to, because we want to set up something very different to what the sell side does. We don't push meetings on our clients. Everything that it's more, we publish our notes, and then if people want to talk to us, that's fine, but we try not to kind of, we do have a sales function, but we don't, we operate in quite a different way to the rest of the sell side, I suppose, and that we just put out an opinion, and then if our clients want to talk to us about it, then we do, rather than aggressively kind of push our pieces.
Sounds almost diffident. I mean, who buys the drinks? Oh, never mind.
We're trying to harvest the analyst time, I think, is the best way of thinking about it, in that sort of circular, virtuous circle of benefit.
Now, did you do anything on the debt or credit side of the market, or is it purely equities?
At the moment, we're purely equities, actually. Although we, as the Dragonfly system develop, actually that data could have equal value to a debt holder ultimately if they want to understand the balance sheet and the disclosure the same way that maybe an equity analyst would want to.
Okay. Could you help the audience understand what the Dragonfly does that other machine-based analytical systems do? What is your unique contribution to the business of extracting meaning from information?
So really what I suppose is quite unique about the system is that our focus is on accounting and governance shenanigans, which to my knowledge, no other system does, at least not to the same extent. So what we're trying to do is to put into code a lot of the red flags that a human analyst would normally look for and might have in their head to look for, or even in a checklist to sort of look through a set of annual counts and to see if they're present. What we're trying to do is to put into code those commonly used or sometimes uncommonly used accounting flags and governance flags that one should look out for, because it's kind of like a person going through with a huge checklist and working out, have inventories risen, for example, faster than sales, and that's just one example of the kind of thing that it looks for. But it's really just putting into code that those red flags that we as human analysts would look for when presented with a set of accounts.
So this Dragonfly elicits something like 600 raw data points per company. Is that it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How long does it take Dragonfly to spit out 600 pieces of information on a company? I suppose 6 or 8 weeks. Is it a month?
Well, it's it's pretty instantaneous.
Or is it 5 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
So Dragonfly works a lot harder than human beings, right? I mean, it doesn't take days off and call in sick.
It also hasn't got any human bias, which is the other wonderful feature, in that you'll service the data and you have to deal with it and work out whether it needs to be taken more seriously or not, without having any previous prejudice against that data.
How is business considering the explosive nature of a short gone wrong?
What we find is that people want to kind of know the risks of whether they're on the long side or the short side. It's really valuable information that is difficult to get in any other way, I guess, or difficult to get at your fingertips so rapidly. So there are various kind of use cases for it, but whether you're a short seller who's kind of seeking out that big blow up, that next kind of Wirecard, or whether you're a long holder who just wants to be aware of, hey, is there anything that I should be looking out for? That's kind of the fact that we have multiple use cases kind of helps to kind of diversify the sales of that product.
What would our listeners pay for access to Dragonfly?
So for access, it depends upon the number of users, but it starts off at $15,000 for a small team, and then it kind of increases up as the number of users increases. So it's kind of priced a little bit like many other software products.
Yeah. So it's $15,000 a week, is it?
That's a year. So it's a bargain. It's a bargain.
It's a bargain. Well, so in your view, is there an upside limit on the number of clients who can be reading this before there are too many and the ideas are too widely distributed and therefore are less lucrative for the subscriber? You have a cap? We at Grants, by way of context, I think, Evan, if memory serves, we have limited our circulation to 5 million people, I think.
Oh, just 5 million.
Yeah. Do you have is there
similar?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Actually, although on the research side, we would consider putting in a cap there because it's very specific insight. On the software side of things, we're probably a bit less concerned about putting in a cap in terms of the number of users, in that actually what it serves as is a kind of generalized risk system for spotting risks. It's not necessarily the be all and end all of, if you have this data, you can outperform it, but it's a starting point for then doing your own work, if that makes sense. It gives you the ability to see where should I, instead of sitting down for a week and reading an annual report, it gives you immediately that ability to see where should I concentrate my effort, what should I ask management. So it's a kind of tool to enable you to do further work yourself. It's not necessarily, much as I'd love it, sell it as a magical alpha tool. It's not quite that, but it tells you where you should be looking as an investor, what you should be focused on.
May I suggest, as a marketing suggestion, you might want to kind of place it as a magical alpha tool, right, Evan? Wouldn't you do that?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I've read enough presentations from the special purpose acquisition companies. Just promise the moon. I mean, when you deliver it, that'll be like 5 years away, and who knows what the world's going to be like then. Just promise everything.
Yeah.
Hey, is there any chance of you gentlemen crossing the Atlantic Ocean as broad as that is and taking up U.S. equities as well? The skepticism market here is I think it's kind of underserved.
Yeah, so at the moment we have a few US clients who are interested in European equities, but that is definitely the next sort of stage in our development, is to develop out our technology to cover US equities, which actually it does need a few tweaks because US GAAP is different to IFRS, and so some of the line items that we're looking at are different, and so we need slightly different sort of tweaks to the algorithm. But it's not like we're starting from square one again. So that's definitely the plan later in the year to roll out US equities as well.
All right. Yeah.
And Jim, one of the interesting things I think in this is that as everyone's dashing for ESG type framework and, everyone's marketing ESG as a way of just raising assets, really. One of the appeals, I think, is that we're doing something on the governance side where you can actually try and apply a bit more of a robust and hopefully coherent framework. And because we're attached to an independent analyst team, there's a constant sort of feedback loop that hopefully means that, you're not left blindsided by changes in attitude or whatever it happens to be. And I think, that'll be one of the challenges for everyone going forward is, as you develop machine tools and everyone tries to put different things to work, is how you adapt and change and learn yourself, with your own inputs. And that's hopefully something that, given we've got the research alongside it, that we can use one another to harness each other, really.
Yeah, terrific. Well, this has been very interesting talking to you, Tom Beevers, and to you, Jules Hull. Thanks for your time and for the Lord's work that you do. Around here at Grants, we feel that anyone who begins with the attitude, yes, but that's the approach we celebrate. So bravo, carry on. And I would also suggest as a marketing thing for the entire city of London, why don't you guys get out of the house and stop this lockdown business? It sounds as if it's becoming rather tedious.
Oh, yeah. They're all getting tired of sitting at home.
That's kind of a free suggestion from the city of New York. So keep us apprised of the new worlds that you're going to conquer as well. When you come to New York, let us know.
Brilliant. Will do. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Jim and Evan.
Thank you.
Yeah,
good to talk. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. On behalf of Current Yield Grant's Interest Rate Observer of the Year, I'm Jim Grant, and we'll talk soon.